Breaking news! ICC Judge kay Kaufman, respetuhin ang desisyong itago ang pangalan ng mga biktima at testigo. Nagpaalala ang presiding judge ng International Criminal Court Pretrial Chamber 1 na si Julia Antonella Motoc sa lead defense counsel ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte, na si Atty. Nicholas Kaufman, na igalang ang mga desisyon ng hukuman kaugnay ng redaction o pagtatakip ng mga pangalan ng mga testigo at biktima. Sa confirmation of charges hearing ngayong araw, nagbigay ng direktang babala ang hukom matapos umanong mabanggit ni Kaufman ang impormasyong maaaring magbunyag ng identidad ng ilang individual na protektado ng korte.
Judge Motoc, good afternoon. I'd like to begin with an oral ruling regarding the redactions made to the transcript and direct broadcasting today. The Chamber notes that redactions were made to the transcript and to the direct broadcast of the hearing subsequent to an application by the prosecution and which was opposed by the defense. The application of the requested redactions apparently would be a problem and could lead to hearings being held in closed session. The Chamber wishes to recall an earlier ruling during which the Chamber stressed that it is up to the parties and participants to ensure that their submissions are worded in such a way as to avoid going into closed sessions, thus ensuring the transparency of the proceedings and to avoid the disclosure of confidential information. The Chamber would remind the parties to comply with these instructions. Furthermore, the Chamber is of the view that the information that was asked to be redacted and also from the direct broadcast today were limited to identifying information of witnesses and victims mentioned during the submissions. The defense disclosed information on several occasions that allowed for the identification of victims and witnesses. For example, positions held and nicknames, things that must not be disclosed so as to ensure the protection of witnesses and victims. The redactions had only to do with identifying information and were not as general redactions to the events within the case. This was the appropriate recourse to implement the Chamber's duty to protect the safety and well-being, including psychological well-being, the dignity and privacy of victims and witnesses in accordance with Article 68 of the Rome Statute, without having to hold the hearing in private or closed session. Thus, the Chamber has decided to maintain the redactions that were applied earlier and reminds the defense not to disclose information that may not be necessary and information that could identify witnesses and victims in accordance with Article 8 of the Code of Conduct of Counsel. I thank you very much, and Mr. Kaufman, you may now proceed and continue your submissions on the merits. You have until 3 p.m. Thank you very much.
President, as you can see, we have a number of yellow post-its on our table here. These are the document identification numbers of all the matters that I'll be talking about. But since we only have until 3 and until 1 hour tomorrow morning, I can provide the ID number if necessary, but I will move on, and we promise to give the Chamber at the conclusion of the hearing the full ID numbers of everything that I've talked about. And if the prosecution obviously wants something as well, he can.
Afternoon, Madam President. I would just ask my friend if he can read out the tab numbers, because every item per the Chamber's instruction has a tab number. So even if my friend doesn't read out the entire ERN of the page he's citing, the lines, if he gives us a tab number, at least we can check his homework in real time.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Counsel, are you in agreement with this position taken by the prosecution? Well, the representative of the OTP. Mr. Kaufman, yes, ma'am. Judge Motek, please proceed.
Come to ask myself another question concerning the nature of a common plan theory which applies equally to its subjective requirements. Has the prosecution shown substantial grounds to believe that Rodrigo Duterte's implementation of its fantasy criminals scheme was of such a nature that the murders detailed in its 49 charged incidents would have ensued as a virtual certainty in the ordinary course of events, and that he foresaw that they would occur as a virtual certainty in the normal course of events? Let us take a moment so that I can assure you that these wonderful words, virtual certainty, actually do exist in the court's case precedent and are not a fiction of my own. If you will, please display the first of two citations from the Abdul Rahman, otherwise known as the Ali Kushaib trial judgment from 2025. First of all, paragraph 795. While the common plan between individuals need not be specifically directed at the commission of a crime, it must nevertheless involve a critical element of criminality, meaning that in the context of the specificities of the case, it was virtually certain that the implementation of the common plan would lead to the commission of crimes. We can have a look at paragraph 706, and it talks about the general knowledge requirements, which I am sure your honours are very familiar with. So, with respect to the question whether the common plan entailed the occurrence of murders as a virtual certainty, the answer is an emphatic and resounding no. First of all, let us recall what the prosecution defines as the former president's list of high-value targets, what the media calls the kill list, and what one of Mr. Edward Jeremy's quoted witnesses referred to as the dead list. The number of individuals on this so-called kill list, the very list on which the prosecution relies to show that the knowledge that death would ensue, is 4,817. Those who are actually neutralized dwarfs in comparison and stands at 248. So, assuming that neutralized actually means killed, which it does not, then there is no virtual certainty attributable to Rodrigo Duterte that death would ensue from this kill list. Rather, a 5% chance. Let us have a look at a bar chart for exactly the same figures used by the prosecution as distributed geographically. I now turn to the issue of control, as it did or did not manifest itself in the crime base. In other words, can it safely be argued that substantial grounds exist to believe that Mr. Duterte's supposed diktat filtered its way down from his mouth and via his co-perpetrators to those who were supposedly going about committing these murders. How has the prosecution shown the concept of automatic compliance, or even virtually automatic compliance, so essential to its pyramidal structure? Well, by and large, and judging from Ms. Robin Croft's submissions, it would appear that the concept of automatic compliance is substantiated by reference to subjective comments made by perpetrators who talk about their will being controlled. For example, transcript, page 37, line 7 onwards. I felt like that I didn't have any choice but to follow their orders. It wasn't possible not to obey his commands. Another example, transcript, page 38, line 17. Co-perpetrators controlled the will of the physical perpetrators. End quote. According to the prosecution, members of the Davao Death Squad had to seek clearance from Mr. Duterte to conduct killings in Davao City. For this wild assertion, the prosecution relies once again on the evidence of criminals it has recruited, all of whom are inherently unreliable because of their being self-confessed vicious murderers, testifying in return for virtual immunity from proceedings at the ICC. We shall analyse the testimonies emanating from these individuals in detail later in my submissions. Now, I can see Mr. Nichols scribbling away there, but I shall be referring to what are called statements of limited use. As for the other modes of liability charged, ordering under Article 25(3)(b and Article 25(3)(c), aiding and abetting, as I have said, no smoking gun, no evidence of a direct order, solicitation, or inducement with respect to any one of the 49 incidents.
Matatandaang pansamantalang itinigil ang livestream ng pagdinig matapos ang bahagi ng presentasyon ng depensa kung saan umano'y may nabanggit na sensitibong detalye. Ang redactions ay bahagi ng mga hakbang ng ICC upang protektahan nila ang mga biktima at testigo. At kung kayo naman ang tatanungin mga kababayan, ano kaya ang inyong reaksyon at komento sa balitang ito? Please comment down below at huwag na rin kalimutang i-like at share ang ating video.
Thank you for watching.